Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Madison Realty Capital, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, AmTrust Title, Ariel Property Advisors, Customers Bank, Capital One Bank, Meridian Capital Group. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handler Real Estate Organization Handro Properties, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Castamatidis Red Apple Group, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Matone Group, Mercantile Bank, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Stonehenge NYC, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Merengoff Family Foundation, the Moynihan Organization, Moynihan Capital Partners, and these friends. Everyone wants to be in the media business. Everything, you go on the phones, there are these podcasts, there are these discussions, there are television shows, there are radio shows, there's streaming media, there's everything going on. So today I've assembled 3 individuals who have their own podcasts. They're in the real estate business, and they're going to tell to you why they went into the podcasting and what's happening in business information and the media. My guests, they include Ofer Cohen, who's the chairman and CEO and founder of Terra CRG and the head of ABK Podcast. Charlie Stevens, who's an associate broker at Cushman & Wakefield, and he's podcast culture. And last but not least, we have Peter Von Der Ray, who's the senior vice president at Marcus & Millichap, and also the podcast Behind the Bricks.
Correct.
So who started first, you or you, in the podcast?
I think I did, right? It's about a year and a half.
So what was the reason to create a podcast? You didn't have enough time selling buildings?
Yeah, I need more time, right? But I think my first idea to do it happened because I went to listen to a podcast on our industry and none existed. And so that was kind of the first moment.
I do have to preface, there are 3 people here with podcasts, and there's another host who has 3 podcasts.
Right.
Many people don't realize that the Stoller Report, Building New York, and In Conversation with Michael Stoller are podcast of.
Correct, yeah. So that was my first idea to start it, is I went to listen to one myself, and one didn't exist. And and I'm talking about my slice of the business.
No,
right?
I understand, but here's the question. Were you a person who listened to podcasts before you created one? Okay, because I have a son in Denver, and he listens to podcasts all the time.
Yeah, well, yes, I was, and it's, I think it's just another form of media, and that ultimately, we were talking about this a couple of minutes ago, that this is not that avant-garde, this is just another form of marketing, and I think as you go in the future, I mean, someone had a TV show, now if you go on YouTube, everybody's got some type of, video media. So I think it's just part of a much larger trend that will probably, there's going to be a lot more of the audio format, but.
So do you just get a little microphone? What do you do?
That's all you need. I essentially found the value in it while I was commuting. I moved out to Long Island, and what am I going to do with my time? I'm going to read, but I started falling asleep. Now I'm going to learn, even my eyes closed. I mean, it's a matter of convenience. It's learning on the go. But there's podcasts out there with, interviews like Tim Ferriss, who's taking, the top leaders in the world, and you're hearing it directly from their mouth, and you're learning from them.
Well, I'm sure you have experiences where you can listen to the book, or you can listen to an interview of the guy who wrote the book,
right?
And it's almost better than the summary, because you'll get, he'll really put out the nuggets out there. So that's probably what you're.
There's also the fact that it's short. I mean, we're talking about. I mean, I don't know. My shows are between 15, 17 minutes, one person, one guest. So it's, it's very consumable. Like, it's easy to consume. You can, you can do it on a
You bring
computer.
up an interesting point. People say when you go to a dinner or something and you see these video presentations over there, you have to keep it to, let's say, 4 to 7 minutes, because otherwise you lose the interest of the viewers. Years ago, when I first started the Stoller Report, they were 1 hour. You don't keep the viewer on for the hour. I think it's a question of time.
The one thing about, and we were also just talking about this, is that a podcast, you can be consuming it, listening to it while you're doing something else. Video, you're not going to be, driving and watching video or, whatever, working out, doing something like podcast. You can throw it in and you can do something else while it's coming into you. So it's a little versatile that way.
What is the purpose, okay? Are you doing it for marketing, or are you doing it for business information? I mean, we're all trying to market ourselves in different veins. Brooklyn, there wasn't a podcast specifically dedicated to Brooklyn, but that's what Terra CRG was.
Right, but I think from my perspective, I appreciate that I'm on a real estate podcast show, but I actually didn't want to do a real estate podcast. I wanted to do a Brooklyn podcast, and so I wanted to have conversations with the people behind the Brooklyn transformation, which are a lot of the people that I do business with and I'm friends with and I hang out with. And like you said, these are the people that are inspiring me. And these are the people that I enjoy dealing with, and I don't think these stories are told as much.
What kind of stories do you tell?
Their path. I mean, from my perspective, the way and I think it's probably similar for you, I'm looking for someone's path. Like, I would like to see their path within the Brooklyn transformation story, right? So their journey, how they started, and some...
So what you're really doing on your informational podcast is an information on the growth and the development of Brooklyn, okay, right, as opposed to specifically relating to real estate, even though a good number of the business relates to real estate because that's what churns the business world. It's
yes, 100%. It's just that I'm less interested in the transactional side. I think that there's already enough conversations about transactions and stats and data. I'm more interested in the personal story, and I think that more people from different sort of industries would listen to a podcast about someone's journey, regardless if he's a real estate guy or a media guy or a restaurateur, because everybody wants to be successful and everybody wants to go through a path and find themselves and do the right thing at the right time and figure it out, right?
So how do you determine who you're going to interview?
So I started, like I said, sort of...
Who was your first interview? David
The first
Kramer?
interview was David Kramer. So the first, when I decided to do the show, I called David Kramer, Marianne Gilmartin, and Toby Moskowitz, and I said, hey, I'm doing a podcast, a new podcast called Hey BK. Do you want to be a guest? And I'll say, sure. And then we booked it. I booked it in one morning, and I recorded all 3 shows, and then we had to kind of figure out from there.
You recorded the 3 shows, and what type of prep did you do for the 3 shows?
Good question. I actually over-prepped for the 3 shows, and what I realized after 3 or 4 or 5 shows, that it's better if I under-prep.
I agree.
Because what I want to do in the show is actually go through the actual discovery with the guests. Because I think that when I actually don't know everything about their path, it's much more a natural progression of how someone is discovering something, and it ended up working much better. For the first 3, I did a lot of sort of preparation in terms of, other than the things that I already know, like other anecdotal references about their biography, but...
Well, you don't want to steer the conversation, right?
Right.
You want to lead it where it's interesting, but you
Exactly.
don't want to say, let's talk about this. And we're all creating content, right? That's what it is. This is content creation right now, and it's all for opportunity. So if I get somebody in the room, I want to tell their story. I want to tell their journey. I want to tell what they're building. what they're doing and what
When you
opportunities
call
they're
them,
looking for.
okay, both of you, all three of you, when you approach somebody, what do you say? Okay, I see that you recently released the podcast with Miles Horn. I met Miles once because I moderated a panel. I knew nothing about him, needless to say, as opposed to Ofer. I had to do research because I didn't know anything, but you knew about these people something, so it's a different case.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you approached him, what did you say to him?
Well, a lot of this, I think, just happens naturally because I'm talking to these people, and like, you guys just said, when you're in the course of this business, you're privy to conversations or stories that I think are inspiring. And, oftentimes I'll be sitting there with my, partner or partners. We're hearing these stories, we're having a great conversation, and it's just happening to only the audience in the room. And other people outside of that room could get a lot of benefit from it, or I think find it interesting if you're in that industry and you're interested in it. So, as far as, getting the guests, it just happens naturally as I'm traveling through, just doing the business,
And
right?
how long is your typical podcast?
Mine are somewhere between half an hour and an hour.
Really?
I stick with 30 minutes, and then if we're flowing, we just keep going.
Yeah.
And you're at the 17, 15?
Yeah, I record, most of our conversations are, when we record the show, it's about 45 to 60 minutes, but then we edit it down to 15 to 20 minutes, say.
So you do a significant editing.
Yes.
I try not to do that, though. And going back to, how the people were looking for to have on the show, my show is called Culture, so interviewing founders about the culture they're creating, that's a hot topic right now. I think that's something that they want to get through. They want to get more talent into their business or tell their story and why they're so good. It just creates an opportunity, and all this content creation is opportunity for them to be heard and for you to try to piece the...
See, but I'm listening and I'm hearing specific individual stories.
Yeah.
Okay? As opposed to a podcast which is informational purposes. And let me give you an example. A couple of the podcasts that I did, which were different or slightly different than the show, was I did a show on lobbying, the art of lobbying. Mm-hmm. People hear the term lobbyist, but they don't know what a lobbyist does. So I specifically brought lobbyists, and I asked them to explain what they do. I did a podcast with regard to the 9/11 Health Act. You read about it, you see something on Facebook, you see something in LinkedIn, but no one explains the rules and the regulations. So those were informational purposes, okay? What I'm hearing now is I'm hearing more on the individual's personality and life and growth and what they may have done for a community as opposed to an informational purpose.
You started out this show, your intro was all about this overload of information, and we're all getting shouted out with all this stuff, right? And I think we all would agree that that's not the issue. Everyone has enough information. Right? People don't have enough insight. And personal stories give little nuggets of insight. And that's, I think, a lot more interesting to hear that type of stuff, because that's relatable. The information is just...
we're trying to take away the rub. I mean, there's some people that do written Q&As with people, and some people like to read it. But some people don't like to read it. And
listen, we're becoming a little philosophical here, but that just may be the evolution of the medium. Right? To do an informational radio style kind of show with a lot of data and a lot of different experts coming in and going, you need a lot more editing, you need a lot more studio time, you need a lot more work.
Yeah.
Talking to one person is basically what we constantly do in our day-to-day like work anyway, right? And
now,
we know how to do that.
I'm going to give you an interesting phenomena. Sirius survives because there are many different channels, different venues over there. And I was on Sirius for about 8 times with a individual, last name was Williams. And basically I was on the Black Power station. That basically he had the time and we discussed. And I was trying to bring out on this station, which was geared to African American people, interesting topics like prostate cancer. And I said to him, and I brought in an expert, I brought in a physician who spoke about this. And he basically humiliated the doctor by saying, I said, there is a larger number of African-American men who have prostate cancer. He says, I'm not African. I said, what are you? He says, I'm black. So he was controversial, and the information. Now, NYU Medical Center has a 24-hour Sirius station on healthcare. And I said to the dean and to the head of administration, why do you have this show? Because the people who are listening to Sirius may be in Dubuque, Iowa, and what are they trying to hear from Dr. Herb Lepore, from Larry Chinitz, or somebody else? They said to me that they did the show for two purposes. One is to let them feel that they were providing some additional information. That's an informational purpose. That station is specifically to provide information on transplants, on health conditions, on heart attacks, or on diet, all the rest. What do you want in your program to evolve, okay? You're starting your second season. You're in your second season. Each one of you are in the second season. Look what happened from the Stoller Report. It changed over there, okay? I've done 360 life stories. At the beginning, everybody was relating to real estate. So how do you see the evolution?
Let me jump in here, because what I see is I'm creating this network of founders, entrepreneurs, and innovators who are building these businesses. Now I have them all over for Founders Night, and I've had a few Founders Night. Now founders are all meeting together. Now I've done a join up. So now I'm providing value to these founders and trying to help them build their businesses. So that wasn't my goal.
So you're creating a YPO type of idea?
Yeah, a more personal one, but also now I'm networking with other ones that are having other events and saying, let's team up together and I'll help you promote it and all this other stuff. So now we're working together, and it's just the collaboration for opportunity.
Yeah, that's a natural outgrowth. But I look at it, to be clear, the only reason why I have the podcast or people listen to it is because I sell buildings. So you gotta, I'm very clear on the reason why this thing exists is because of, what the main business is, and this is just something that ties into it. So it's not like...
Okay, but you have partners also.
Right.
Okay? There's an expense to a podcast. It may not be expensive, okay, but there is an expense. In addition to the expense, there's time needed in the podcast that you have to take away from your family and from your business and from everything else. How does your family and how does your partners feel about the podcast?
I don't know that the time commitment, it's not that big of a time commitment. So first of all,
right, once a month is not a...
Right, this isn't it's not a big time commitment where it really takes away from the business or family or anything like that, So, that's one of the things we brought up, and I think why they're popular, or, maybe while the space is crowded, it'll probably become a lot more crowded, is because it's a low-touch, low-tech medium. But, I don't know. I just think that's clear. It's a whole different game plan if you're trying to go into the media business, which I don't think any of us are. But it's what drives the podcast is the actual business that it's about. So
you ask your business partners. My job is to meet with office leasing tenants. Now I have a podcast where I'm highlighting those office leasing tenants and talking about their business growth. So you go back and how am I trying to get people on the podcast? Oh, they just grew and took the whole building. That's interesting. How did they do that? Why are they growing their business? I want to get in there and talk to them.
You work for a public corporation. You work for a public corporation. You own your own business. How does your public corporation accept that Charlie Stevens has his own podcast?
Well, I kind of flew underneath the radar for a little bit.
But now you're not. Now you're public.
Okay? But what's my job? My job is to get meetings with tenants. And when I go into those meetings, before I did this, I sat with them and I'd say, your office building is rented this much and this person's above you and below you and there's a lease going on. Now I'm going in there and I'm letting them talk to me and tell me their whole life story. So I'm sitting back and I'm learning.
So has it produced direct revenues for you?
Yes, absolutely. And not to mention, I think we're all in the real estate business. This is not an immediate, you don't get a deal the next day from meeting someone. Again, it's a relationship builder for me.
So Cushman had no problem?
No problem.
Okay, and Marcus?
No.
My bosses didn't have any problem either.
But you have partners. You have
Yeah,
similar,
so
but they're not-
I think that, there's a lot of, this just falls into a lot of other things that I do as part of running a brokerage and being a broker in the
being involved
market.
heavily in Brooklyn.
I'm on 4 different charitable boards. I'm the chair of a board. So I'm doing a lot of other things, and there was always a big commitment that I made. And not only that, I'm asking my partners to make similar commitments. And what we did for the second season is we repurposed a room in our office, and we made it a podcast studio. And the hope is that other people that work for us would have their own show. I mean, we have a couple guys that said, "Oh, I want to do a show about food in Brooklyn." Great. I think the proliferation of it is just good for Brooklyn. It's good for us, and it's good for, So I guess for me as an owner of a brokerage and as someone that's in a lot of public places, it's just a natural extension having a podcast. It's not, and because it's not as transactional.
Now I'm going to approach the three of you in a different manner. Okay, each one of you has a podcast, which has been around for a year, which is becoming seasoning, as they would say. It's becoming a seasoned product. You have another alternative in New York City. You have stations on the weekend, like WOR, WABC, and another one where John Catsimatidis is on 970, I forgot whatever they called, where you can buy time, where you can put this podcast on radio. Okay? It's not cheap, but it's a venue of where, as an approach, you can take, hey BK, over there in the other products, okay, because behind the bricks, okay? And now you have a show over there, but you have a much significant increase in the expense. We're talking about something that's minor in cost compared to now buying an hour on WABC from 3 to 4 in the morning even.
Right.
Yeah, the question is if it's even relevant. I mean,
I think
do you need to reach the people that are listening to these shows? I mean,
Yeah, but the point is, if you had the radio show, then that radio show becomes a podcast.
right.
I'm bootstrapping over here. I'm like a startup. I mean, that's the way I look at my podcast. I mean, it is very minimal to start a podcast. You need a few mics, which I got a few gift cards, put together mics, went to B&H. Love B&H. It's a great place. And just put it together in a conference room. Now now I'm rolling. I don't have the money. I got a baby at home. I got a wife pregnant with twins, boys.
Congrats.
Coming soon. Thank you. So like I wish I could tell my wife, hey, let's put together.
But what I'm trying to say is the evolution of the podcast. Okay.
Yes.
There are people, as we've said before, they may not have. It's you have the one in the Midwest telling you can make a mint in real estate. You have the motivational podcasts over there. How I flip the houses. All this type of situation.
Well, I'm starting.
Yeah. No. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to. I don't think it's a mass market per se. Not that it needs to. I mean, from my perspective, it's a Brooklyn podcast. There are probably people that we need to reach with this podcast outside of Brooklyn because Brooklyn is exciting for a lot of people. I was just in Asia. There's Brooklyn and Williamsburg T-shirts in every flea market in Bangkok. I mean, yeah, Brooklyn is a brand. People want to see what is the Brooklyn success story and replicate it in other towns and other places in the world. So to that extent, maybe there's a growth there, but I don't know that it's going to be attained via sort of traditional distribution
here's my
models.
question. How are you each promoting your podcast? How are you getting people to find out about the podcast?
Social media.
I mean, we promote things for a living.
No, but you promote.
So.
Do you promote the same way on the podcast?
Exact same way as well, and also just to use Ofer's example, if I was in Bangkok and I wanted to find out about Brooklyn and I got on the Google, there's a good chance I would probably end up running into something about his show. And now I can sit there in Bangkok and listen to him interview 5 people about Brooklyn. And, in an hour and a half, I can be up to date on like some of the current stuff that's happening in Brooklyn. I can be around the world. If you want to find out about multifamily world in, New York multifamily, you could, you'll jump on, listen to a couple episodes and you'll be right there. So to tie it back into your radio thing, this medium can get very, very targeted, both on what the content is and who's searching for it, whereas the radio is, it's more of a shotgun approach, and it's probably not, I think, it's not who I'm going for, and probably not you guys as well, because it doesn't really fit with what the overall game plan is,
Well, the evolution for me, I'm starting to record some of these episodes similar to what we're doing here, and telling the story of the neighborhood where these founders, entrepreneurs are located. So it just takes away the friction. Again, going back to some people like to read, some people like to watch a video, some people like to listen. So throwing that all out on social media, either Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn is huge for this. I mean, you put this out on LinkedIn, you get thousands of views of this show right now. So just kind of getting out their story on all different platforms and trying to reach as many people as possible.
So I think in summation, podcasts are getting larger. They're continuing. They're an basically inexpensive approach to market yourself and to provide information to the community. And I think each and every one of you is trying to provide information about people, about their growth and their success. You're geared more about people in Brooklyn. You're geared more about evolution of people growing their companies. And you're more geared to people who've been involved with the multifamily world and over there. And I think each one of you people should be listening to Hey BK,
Culture Podcast.
Culture Podcast with Charlie Stevens.
Got it.
Okay, and Behind the Bricks with Peter Von Der Ray.
Yep.
And I'll see you next week.